not be ceding its will to the Senate. I certainly am among those. That we should consider bills to reopen the government that represent a bipartisan, bicameral compromise. Well, today is the day. The six-bill consolidated appropriations package is the result of genuine bipartisan negotiations between the House and Senate appropriations committees. It is not some Democratic wish list, but rather a true compromise that would reopen the entire government apart from the Department of Homeland Security. The short-term CR for the DHS would allow the men and women employed by this agency to return to work while we continue the very serious discussion about how to effectively address border security. Considered together, these two bills will fully open the government. I hope my friends on the other side of the aisle will join with us to end the Trump administration's needless shutdown so we can finally get hundreds of thousands of federal employees back to work, and I might add the residual damage that's done not just with those federal employees is considerable and needs to be considered by all of us as we cast our votes. If judged on its merits, the minibus would get veto-proof veto votes in both chambers, and we could then end this shutdown regardless of the latest whims of the president, and that's what we should do. I'm now very privileged to turn to my very good friend, our ranking member, Mr. Cole, the distinguished gentleman from Oklahoma, for any remarks that he would like to make.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to begin by saying how pleased I am to see you in the chair.
Thank you
and,
very much.
You know, we're all pulling for you each and every day. And
thank you, sir.
It lifts my spirits to see you, so we're glad you're here. Second, you know, you're always overmatched on the Rules Committee, but we're usually not this overmatched. We've had a couple of flight delays and an illness ourselves, and so I apologize for that, but we'll struggle through as best we can. I want to begin, frankly, by congratulating the majority. This is a better product than we've seen before, and the chairman's precisely right. This does represent a genuine conference article in many ways, not completely conferenced, obviously, because in a real conference, nothing's agreed to until everything's agreed to, and Homeland Security is not agreed to in this bill. But this is still a better product than we've seen so far, so I think that ought to be recognized. Unfortunately, I think the same obstacles that we've had so far are going to, reassert themselves again, Mr. Chairman. The Senate has said it's not going to take up a bill that the president won't sign. The president will not sign this bill because it does not deal with Homeland Security. So in that sense, we're going to go through this exercise yet again. The president said that this is an issue he thinks could be settled in a 45-minute meeting. I don't know if that's the case or not, but I know we have wasted 338 hours over the last 2 weeks, now all on the floor, 5 of them up here. We'll do that again tonight, 21 of them on the floor. But that's 2 weeks where essentially no substantive negotiations has gone on. So my friends will have every right to advance the legislation. I applaud their effort here. It's better. I'm pleased they want to reopen the government. I agree. But I think doing the same thing essentially over and over is not likely to get us there. So I would hope that they take the time to sit down with the Senate and sit down with the president and arrive at something that all three can agree. I don't need to tell any of my distinguished colleagues up here, although I used to have to say it occasionally to some of my friends in the House, just passing legislation in the House doesn't get you very far. And you'll certainly pass this bill, and that's all fine. But if it doesn't pass the United States Senate, we have no indication that it will. If the President of the United States won't sign it, we have every indication that it won't, or that he won't. And if you don't have two-thirds majority in each chamber to override that, then this isn't going to become law. And so I think it's one more pointless exercise. And again, I'm happy to play my role in it, but I would urge my friends to reconsider and sit down. The President put on the table what I thought was a substantive offer on Saturday. You don't have to agree with that. You don't have to agree with everything in it, but he did put something new on the table. I haven't seen anything new out of my friends. It's the same thing over and over and over again. If you don't agree with what he says, put something on the table. If not, I guess we can continue to go through this exercise, but I don't think it's moving us in a direction I know my friend sincerely want to go. And so I would invite them to participate in the negotiation with the president to find some middle ground, as they're going to have to do on each and every bill that comes to law in the next 2 years. And might as well get used to dealing with the other party and the other chamber and a president of the other party now, because that's not going to change over the next 2 years. So with all due respect, Mr. Chairman, I applaud the effort, and I'm pleased that the product is better and that it represents real input from the House, and that's a step in the right direction. So maybe we'll inch closer. I thought the president inched a little closer, too, on Saturday, but I think we could make this go a lot faster if people would just sit down with the president and the Senate, if our chamber and our leadership on both sides of the aisle would, and arrive at a deal, because we're not going to resolve it this way, and we're not going to jam the United States Senate or the President of the United States, in my opinion. So with that, Mr. Chairman, thank you, as always, for graciously yielding me time. I yield back.
I thank my friend, and I'd like to call up the first panel, please. Mr. Bishop, Mr. Sereno, Mr. Quigley, Mr. Fontenberry. I don't think he's here yet, but when he comes, someone please tell him to join the table. And Mr. Adderholt and Mr. Graves. Mr. Bishop, why don't we just start with you, since you were on that end, and we want to try to move through these as swiftly as possible. Any written comment that you may have for our awesome stenographer, as Pete Sessions used to say.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We are now in the 32nd day of the partial government shutdown. Our vital services have been eliminated or stretched to the breaking point. This must end. Although I regret the circumstances that have brought us here today, I'm proud of the fiscal year 19 Agricultural, Rural Development, Food and Drug Administration and related agencies bill that is before us today. As you know, this would have been the conference report if the appropriations committees had been allowed to finish their work last year. To my colleagues who objected to bringing up the bill that passed the Senate by a vote of 92-6 because it did not reflect House priorities, I hope you'll support this bill now. I can assure you that the process on this bill included all four sides, House and Senate majorities and House and Senate minorities. Each side had an equal voice. When we work together like that, the end product is a bill that we can all be proud of. This is a good bill that will also end the shutdown at USDA and FDA. By doing so, aid for farmers will be resumed and county farm service agencies will be reopened across the country. Funds for economic development loans and grants for rural areas, particularly the smallest and poorest communities, will begin to flow again. This bill will ensure the continuation of the National School Lunch Program, WIC, and SNAP. It will allow more than 8,400 USDA meat and poultry inspectors to be paid for the work that they've been doing for free, and it will allow FDA to conduct food safety inspections at the necessary level instead of at the bare minimum level. This legislation provides over $23 billion in discretionary funding, which is roughly equal to the FY18 enacted level. It provides $3.4 billion for agricultural research, an increase of $383 million above the FY18 level. The Farm Production and Conservation Mission area, which includes the Farm Service Agency, is funded at $2.75 billion, slightly above the 18 level. The legislation also makes significant investments in rural development by providing $41.3 billion, including maintaining the $550 million for broadband in rural areas that was included in the House bill. The bill provides $1.7 billion for Food for Peace, and it funds the McGovern-Dole program at $210 million. Finally, the bill provides the Food and Drug Administration with $3 billion in discretionary funding, $269 million above the FY18 enacted level. It includes important investments to fight the opioid epidemic and to promote domestic manufacturing of and new drug development. As I said before, This bill touches the lives of every American. I urge the members on all sides to support this bill, reopen the government, and restore the services that Americans count on.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bishop. Mr. Serrano?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to new chairman, Mr. McGovern.
Microphone. Get your mic. Thank you.
I thought you were calling me Mike.
He's next to you.
Yes, I know. Well, congratulations from Mike to all of you. I'm here as the chairman of the Commerce, Justice, Science, Appropriations Subcommittee to discuss the CJS portion of the Consolidated Appropriations Act. We are currently in day 32 of the Trump shutdown. The impact is growing as employees miss paychecks, individuals and groups dependent upon federal assistance go without, and our public safety and scientific innovation is undermined. This is particularly true for the agencies under the jurisdiction of CJS Subcommittee. Just last week, the Department of Justice had to scramble to find cash to allow recipients of grant programs under the Violence Against Women Act to be funded for one additional month. The New York City field office of the FBI had to set up a food bank for employees who are currently working without pay. More than 90,000 employees at the Department of Justice, which includes the FBI, DEA, ATF, U.S. Marshals, and the Bureau of Prisons, are working without pay. More than 90% of employees at NASA are currently furloughed without pay, and more than 86% of employees at Commerce are also furloughed without pay. These stories are sickening, and our president should stop undermining our future for an ineffective and unnecessary wall. Sadly, his latest proposal does not acknowledge the reality that he must compromise. This bill offers us a bipartisan way out of this crisis. It is a compromise that House and Senate negotiators worked out last fall. While the CJS section does not contain everything that our side might have wanted, it does contain important investments in science, innovation, justice, and economic development. And in fact, with a very few changes, this portion of H.R. 648 very closely mirrors what the Senate introduced just last night. The CJS division of this bill includes important investments in Census Bureau, NASA, the National Science Foundation, and the FBI. It rejects the administration's proposed cuts to the Economic Development Administration, the Minority Business Development Agency, the Manufacturing Extension Partnership Program, and a few more. I urge members on both sides to move this bill forward quickly and support it on the floor. We need to end the shutdown and reassert our authority as a co-equal branch of government. Our constituents deserve no less. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Serrano. Mr. Quigley?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman and the ranking member. I appreciate the opportunity. I feel like I've been here before. I'm not sure exactly. It's a
Is
strange
your mic on mic?
It is. Look, there's things I need to say to get them on the record, and there's things I need to say because we got to cut to the chase. The FSG division of this bill provides $23.8 billion in total discretionary resources. That's an increase of $387 million over the fiscal year 2018. The bill rejects the president's proposed elimination of CDFI fund and cuts to the Small Business Administration. And more importantly, this bill will reopen the Department of Treasury, including the entire IRS, the SEC, SBA, and multiple other agencies, and put about 100,000 workers back to work. Notably, an increase of $17.2 million for efforts to combat money laundering, terrorism financing, $77 million in funds to support implementation of a new tax law, and 7% boost in funding for federal defenders. It is also notable it has a total lack of controversial riders. These bills are tough enough to pass without them. They do no good here. Bottom line, why are we here? We're here because the president thinks we need a wall. I was at the border in October with our grizzled veterans who know about more about this than we do. Nobody was talking about building more wall. They're talking about building roads that are parallel to the border so they could have access to those attempting to cross. They were talking about boats on the Rio Grande. They were talking about tech, sensors, cameras, drones, right? If we want to lead, let's tell the American public the truth. If you're concerned about border security, why don't you implement things that address border security? And within the FSGG part of this, we do just exactly that. If I hear one more time that if we don't build a wall, all the drugs will come into America, when the facts are, and the experts tell us, that 87% of the hard narcotics, cocaine, heroin, and meth, are coming into our country through official land ports of entry. So you can build a 100-foot wall, and they're still coming through. That's why this bill responsibly puts money where it is most critically needed and invests $542 million to fully fund construction needs at 2 of the highest priority land ports of entry along the southwest border. Coupled with investments in technology and personnel, these infrastructure improvements will do far more than a wall to stem the flow of illegal goods, narcotics, and people being smuggled into the country. I know everybody wants to short circuit this and cut to the chase and pass the measure that will do this, but when you take an extreme position, it's hard to compromise. And when you propose something that just doesn't work, it's not a compromise, it's just foolhardy. If what we're really getting into here is border security, we can compromise because it makes sense. If not, I suspect we'll be here again next week, which would be a tragedy.
Quigley. I'll add one thing to what you said. Fentanyl comes by way of the mail and not just through our borders, and does a considerable amount of damage in our country. And I think all of us know that. Mr. Idaho?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Ranking Member Cole and members of the Rules Committee. I thank you for the opportunity to come and testify before you this afternoon, and of course, come asking that you adopt an open rule for the consideration of these appropriation bills that is before us. I am here testifying in my new role as the ranking member of the Commerce, Justice, Science Subcommittee, and let me say I look forward to working closely with my friend and colleague Chairman Serrano in his role as the new role as chairing the subcommittee. I appreciate the bill we're considering, that it includes many of the CGS agreements that Chairman Serrano made last year with then Chairman Culberson. And I'm pleased with many of the funding levels that were included for federal law enforcement, assistance to our state and local law enforcement partners, and many of our NASA programs. However, it's been said the President has made it clear that he will not support the spending bill, and that does not address the urgent border security, in particular with the wall. While this package may have some very good features, and let me say it does have a lot of good features, it fails to address the border security issue that the President has deemed important for the Department of Homeland Security. Instead of continuing to put the appropriation bills on the floor that we know the President won't support, I would ask my friends on the other side of the aisle to negotiate, to make a counteroffer, to come back to the President with a proposal. Federal employees are not being paid, as we all well know, or many of the federal employees. Government services that Americans depend on are not being provided. Along the southern border, we are seeing women and children are being abused as they are trafficked by smugglers. Drugs do come in from across the border. I know there's a discussion about when, what kind, come where, but of course I think it's, we know that there are drugs that come across the border that destroy American lives. The majority party continues to refuse to really put a real serious counteroffer on the table. So, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Cole, I'm ready to sit down and work with my colleagues trying to find agreement to get our federal employees back to work, get the government operating again, and also to secure the border in a fashion that the President could move forward with. Today, I ask again that you adopt an open rule for debate on this bill, allowing for amendments to the bill so that they can lead to the end of the government shutdown. I'm happy at the appropriate time to answer any questions that you might have, and I thank you again for letting me come and testify before the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Graves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to be back with you, Mr. Cole, members of the committee. I really don't know why we're here doing this again. We were here just the other week. This is the third time that we've seen the new majority party bring forward a package that the president clearly is not going to support and is not a good faith effort to bring us to closure at this time when I think hundreds of thousands of federal employees are counting on us to get this right. And yet here we are again. In fact, I think the bill before us probably very closely represents what the majority party put on the floor the very first day or two of this new session that has not opened the government. I would suggest that Mr. Quigley and we worked really hard last year, and I know that this has been billed as a compromise bill, but it is the furthest thing from that because he and I had good faith discussions last year along with the Senate. We did reach consensus on many provisions of which are not included in this. So to characterize this as the conference committee compromise bill is mischaracterizing truly what this is. In fact, if everyone really wants to know, I mean, you don't have to read through the bill yourself to see it in financial services here. You're actually looking at the Senate bill that we voted on just 2 weeks ago. It's basically the exact same bill, move a few numbers around. Nowhere does it reflect the House priorities, and I think I made the case then, Mr. Chairman, that are we to just be floor leaders for the Senate, or are we going to put our fingerprint on policy as we see fit in the House of Representatives? In fact, you are omitting over 20 pieces of bipartisan legislation that were included in the House measure, that were included in the conference committee report at the time in September. Many members, including Maxine Waters, were sponsors of those pieces of legislation, but they're being omitted in the name of compromise. And in fact, I'll reflect back on Saturday. I thought the president took a very courageous step and put out a reasonable proposal. While other members of the majority party wanted to leave the country, the president was steadfast in staying here and putting forth a proposal that before he could reach the lectern was rejected by the majority party. How is that in the spirit of compromise? How is that in the spirit of trying to work to a conclusion here, Mr. Chairman? So without really even reflecting on my notes here, this is very frustrating for me. It's very frustrating for my constituents. I can imagine for each of the committee members here to see us come back again and make the same speeches and pleas to reach a true agreement. I think it's frustrating for everybody. So, Mr. Chairman, I respectfully oppose this bill before us and ask that we move forward in a more good faith effort in the future.
Thank you very much, Mr. Graves. Mr. Fontenberry, thank you for joining us. If you pass the mic over, and if you could get a little closer for yourself, that'd be comfortable.
Thank you, Judge Hastings. Ranking Member Cole, nice to see you all. Thank you. No one wins in a shutdown. No one wins if the border is not secure. This morning on my way here, I arrived at the airport, scrambling to get on the plane. And I live in a fairly small state, so we all kind of know one another. And I know a lot of the TSA employees. Gentleman checked my ID, checked my boarding pass, and he said, Congressman, can you vote for this week? Now, I believe he was referring to the bill that will be before the Senate. And I said, yes, I can. I said, I know this is tough. Thank you for being here. He said, it's real tough. Please, can we get something done? And we talked a little bit more about the dynamics of what's going on here, the frustration he has. I asked him how long could he hold out. He said about 30 days, but it's just getting tough. And I recognize the difficulty and the trauma that this shutdown has caused on many Americans who work for the federal government. I'm also reflecting, though, the comments of many Nebraskans as well who want border security. But somehow we're stuck. These two things are not incompatible goals. Reopening the border or reopening the government and achieving the right balance of border security that would include personnel, technology, as well as barriers. Now, it seemed to me that the President did put forward a reasoned offer this weekend. In fact, I said immediately afterward, good deal, Mr. President, let's go. I thought Senator Langford's comments were particularly good, though, when he said, you know, this is an offer. Doesn't mean yes or no, in or out. It's an offer. And it's a place that I think could begin an appropriate negotiation between all parties in order to achieve two things that are absolutely comparable: getting everybody back to work and getting the right type of border security. So that's primarily what I wanted to say, Congressman Hastings. I don't think the American people want us to go back into our respective corners here. I just don't think they want that. But I don't think by commingling shutdown with the ideals of border security that have enjoyed robust bipartisan support in the past, including many of the things that the President proposed, even if we could use that as a starting place, I think that may break this impasse. So I appreciate the committee's indulgence and the time, and thank you for listening. Thank you,
I thank you all. I have a lot of questions, but I'm going to forego them in the interest of time and so many members being here, and turn to my good friend, Mr. Cole, if he has any questions at this time. All right, thank you. Ms. Matsui? I'll hold my remarks to the end. Mr. Perlmutter? Yes. Anyone else on our side? No questions? Okay, thank you all so very much. Excuse me, Ms. Lesko. I'm sorry, Ms. Lesko. That's why I didn't call on you in the first place.
Yeah, that'd be really brief. I do have, I guess, a question for Mr. Quigley, if he's still there, yes. Mr. Quigley, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Quigley, I think you said, let me make sure I heard you right, that really, I'm paraphrasing it, no one is really talking about needing a wall. We don't need a wall or a fence. We just need drones and technology and that type of thing. Am I paraphrasing it correctly?
No, what I said was when I traveled to the southern border, none of our experts talked to me about needing more wall. They talked to me about needing roads that were parallel to the wall so they have access and can protect the border more. They need the ability to detect and have access to be able to respond. And some of that was, they referenced in the other areas that it would be boats on the Rio Grande, and it would be a technical way to respond, to be able to understand and have access to where the breaks are.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Quigley and the other members. I just want to share with you my experience because I'm from Arizona, and it's a border state, and I, too, went down to the border as recently as, I think October was the last time I was there, in Nogales, Arizona, and I asked the Border Patrol officials and the rank-and-file agents if a border fence was needed, and all of them said yes, it was. Now, this is not the solution to every single immigration problem, but all of them said it was a vital part of a package that does include more technology, does include more border agents, does include more judges, and I think that is what the President actually proposed. I have his proposal somewhere in all of my papers here that not only includes funding for the fence, but more technology, more agents, more immigration judges, more drug technology equipment. And so, again, I know you've heard it from me before. I do ask my colleagues on the Democrat side if they would please talk to their leadership and come forward with a counteroffer if you don't like the offer the President and the Republicans have given, so we can please reopen this government, because in part of negotiations, both sides have to show up. Right now, I only see one side showing up, and it's kind of hard to negotiate and get the government back open if the other side doesn't show up. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lesko, and I apologize to you. I sat in that chair for almost 11 years, so I got used to being ignored. Thank you all, our witnesses, and now with these witnesses leaving, I'd like to call up Ms. Loy, Ms. McCollum, Mr. Price, Mr. Rogers, and Mr. Diaz-Balart, my colleague from Florida. I don't see him here. Whenever he arrives, if someone would tell him he's welcome to join the panel. Everybody else? Did we not? Did we not get the gentleman that's beckoning to me?
I'm sorry, say that again?
McCollum, Price, Rogers, Diaz-Balart. We didn't get. What's his name? Okay, that's all right. I'll find out from the staff. Dave,
Mr. Joyce, isn't,
have him come on. He's been here.
right,
What's his name?
which one?
Coming around now. Joyce. Mr. Joyce, you're joining us? Yeah, I apologize. I know you've been here a long time. We're going to start with Ms. Lloyd.
Yeah.
Everybody situated? It is my pleasure to welcome to the floor Ms. Lloyd. If we could have order, we could move this matter. If we could have a little bit of order over here on these sidebar conversations. We'll wait for you, Ed. Okay. Ms. Lloyd?
I'll greet Chairman McGovern if he isn't here, and
I will.
thank you to our distinguished Mr. Hastings, Mr. Cole, and all the other distinguished members of this committee. I want to thank you all for the opportunity to testify. I'll be brief. Thank you. As we have our subcommittee chairs here to discuss their divisions of the bill. The Trump shutdown, now in its 32nd day, must end without delay so the federal government, including the Department of State and related agencies included in this bill, can get back to fully working on behalf of the American people. The solution is simple: reopen the government, pay our federal employees, and then negotiate border security and immigration policy proposals that can command bipartisan support. The bill before us is yet another step in that direction. Today, Democrats are bringing forward 6 conference reports negotiated last December when Republicans controlled the House, the Senate, and the White House. If members of the Republican Party are serious about governing with us for the betterment of all Americans, then they should vote for these 6 conference reports and reopen the agencies covered by those bills. In addition, Chairwoman-designate Roybal Allard is bringing forward a continuing resolution for the Department of Homeland Security through February 28th. This legislation will ensure that the Department of Homeland Security is open and that its employees are paid while President Trump and Congress negotiate border security and immigration policy. I want to quickly discuss the State and Foreign Operations Bill that my ranking member and my friend, the former chairman, negotiated with me and Senators Graham and Leahy. It's a very good bill. It no longer includes poison pills, such as the expansion of the global gag rule, which would have tied up $8.8 billion in funding for life-saving nutrition programs and efforts to prevent malaria, TB, and HIV. It no longer bans funding for the United Nations Population Fund, which would have eroded the progress we've made on both maternal and child health and access to family planning services. A strong international affairs budget of $54.2 billion will provide for critical programs that stabilize the world economy, help meet unprecedented humanitarian needs around the world, and continue our fight against radical extremism, and terrorism. My friends, these bills were written by the Republican-led House and Senate together with Democrats. Neither Democrats nor Republicans got everything they wanted, but we compromised for the betterment of the United States. These bills should be enacted. I hope my colleagues will support the joint decisions made by the House and Senate. Together, let's end the Trump shutdown for all Americans. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Chair Lady Lloyd. Ms. McCullough?
Good evening, Chairman Hastings and Ranking Member Cole and other members of the Rules Committee, and I appreciate the opportunity to be in front of you today and testify on fiscal year 2019 Interior, Environment, and other related agencies bills. The bill before us is a product of bipartisan negotiations, and they were great negotiations we had. It reflects the priorities of members of both the House and the Senate. The bill provides $35.6 billion, which is $300 million more than fiscal year 2018 enacted bill. The bill makes a number of important investments, including increases for addressing the deferred maintenance backlog of our public lands, which during the shutdown are being destroyed, for the EPA water infrastructure grants and hazardous waste cleanups, and for the arts agencies in this bill. Perhaps most critical, the Interior bill upholds our federal government's trust responsibility to our Native American brothers and sisters. The bill provides $266 million increase for Indian Health Service, the largest increase for any agency in the bill, and $17 million increase for the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And I thank my good friend, and I mean this sincerely, Mr. Cole, for his work in making that happen. The funding for Indian country in this bill is $1 billion more than the President's budget. The Trump budget shutdown is inflicting serious harm on Indian country, and from which it might be impossible for some individuals to recover. Basic services like health clinics, tribal justice services, food assistance for seniors is being put at risk for 1.9 million Native American brothers and sisters throughout this country. So this bill is a lifeline to restart funding and to stop such senseless cruelty and chaos. Democrats have continued to advance bills to reopen the government and end the Trump shutdown. And I heard what my colleagues said earlier about negotiating good faith. Well, if the President was serious about negotiating in good faith, the names that I heard on the Saturday news release would not have just been Kushner and Pence. It would have included members of this august body on both sides of the aisle, from both chambers. I've listened to my colleagues across the aisle, and they've repeatedly insisted that if we brought the conference bills, they would give it serious consideration, and many said their support. This is the conference bill, and it is a product of compromise. The programs in the Interior bill impact every single one of us, from preserving our natural and cultural resources to protecting our health and safety by ensuring that we have clean air to breathe and clean water to drink. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support this bill and to bring our federal workers back to work with full pay. Again, I thank the members of the Rural Committee for the opportunity to testify on H.R. 648. With that, I yield back.
Thanks, Ms. McCullum. Mr. Price?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Cole, other colleagues. I appreciate the chance to testify before you and to urge that we schedule for debate H.R. 648, legislation to reopen and responsibly fund the government. That would include the two departments that my subcommittee is responsible for, transportation and housing and urban development. This bill reflects the conference agreement that was reached on a bipartisan, bicameral basis last year. My friend and our chairman, Mr. Diaz-Balart, was an excellent partner during this process. I think he would agree that we succeeded in securing numerous House priorities from both parties in the final package. Unfortunately, the House and Senate leadership at that time failed to bring this legislation to the floor before the end of the 115th Congress. They failed in September. They failed again in December. Now we have a chance to rectify that mistake.
Division F, that's HUD of H.R. 648, includes $71.1 billion in discretionary funding. That's $23 billion above the President's budget request and $1 billion above fiscal 2018 enacted. This total includes more than $17 billion for new housing and transportation infrastructure, in addition to other funds derived from the Highway Trust Fund and other dedicated funding streams. It includes several $billion of funding above the authorized levels to accelerate improvements to our aviation system, to expand transit and rail networks, replace aging highway and bridge infrastructure, and make improvements at our nation's ports. The measure also includes robust funding to preserve and expand our affordable housing stock, particularly for vulnerable populations like veterans, seniors, the disabled, while locking in increases to flexible grant programs like CDBG, HOME, programs that are vital for local governments. Just as important, this legislation would end the shutdown. It would finally reopen DOT and HUD and allow more than 20,000 furloughed employees to receive back pay and return to their mission of serving the American people. This Trump shutdown has dragged on for more than a month now, shuttering vital government services, creating chaos and uncertainty for families, businesses, communities in each of our districts, the people who work faithfully for these agencies and the people whom they serve. The President, because he wants a wall he decided on very, very late in the process, by the way, and didn't even ask for in his own budget. In order to get that wall, he's taken all these agencies hostage. He's taken DOT hostage. And the strain on our aviation system is growing worse every day. The President's taken HUD hostage, and housing contracts have lapsed, putting tenants in jeopardy. The impacts are growing. They're growing worse every day. So H.648 would finally end all this hostage-taking. It would ensure that vital transportation and housing infrastructure is funded for the remainder of this fiscal year. Meanwhile, a separate bill would allow negotiations to continue on the border security items that the President is so concerned about. So, Mr. Chairman, this legislation is the result of months and months of bipartisan collaboration. It excludes problematic policy riders. It enhances priorities from both sides of the aisle. So I urge my colleagues to support the common sense approach that this bill represents and to open up DOT, open up HUD with an appropriations agreement that will support and indeed enhance their work for fiscal 2019. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Price. Now I turn to my good friend, Mr. Rogers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much, and congratulations on your position before this committee.
Albeit temporary.
Looks good, though.
Life is good, though. And to my close friend, the ranking member, Tom Cole, we're delighted to have him as the ranking member of this committee, as well as responsible places on the Appropriations Committee itself. Mr. Chairman, the first 6 bills that we enacted into law earlier in the year, and these 6 bills represent the hard work of the Appropriations Committee and is standing proof that if you leave us alone, we can get things done.
That's right. Right.
And so these bills that we worked out agreeably to conclusions are good bills. They represent a lot of hard work on our committee's part as well as other people. But I'm concerned that in its current form, the measure has no chance of becoming law because it doesn't include a compromise on border security. And that's too bad because we're holding up the government. We are causing a lot of people unnecessary pain and suffering, and we need to get this done. And what I'm talking about is a compromise on border security. All of us, I think, are for border security in one form or the other. We just simply can't agree on the same chapter and verse of that notion. But we must find an answer to it, Mr. Chairman. And I think here in this committee, your committee, you have the chance, you have the opportunity, I think the obligation, to make the rule on this bill transparent enough and open to some constructive criticism on the floor of the bill to make it happen. And I salute you for your efforts in that regard. I want to say a few words about the funding for the Department of State Foreign Operations and related programs, of which I am the ranking member, along with my chairman, Ms. Loy, who chairs this subcommittee as well as the full committee, and has done a superb job over a long period of time. And she's become an expert in the programs that's in this bill. I'm sorry? With your help. This portion of the bill has important funding for our national security. It supports our allies and partners, including $3.3 billion in foreign military financing for Israel. That's $200 million over the previous year. It also maintains funding at or above last year for Egypt, Jordan, Tunisia, as well as countries facing Russian aggression, such as Ukraine and Georgia, in our own hemisphere. The bill supports programs to counter transnational criminal organizations and the flow of illegal drugs. I'm pleased to say, Mr. Chairman, that this bill reflects many bipartisan House priorities that we worked on with Chairman Lowy, including $800 million for basic education and important increases in global health, such as additional funds to combat tuberculosis. It also maintains the current levels for embassy security in this dangerous world. In light of this, all this, Mr. Chairman, I hope the committee will report out a rule that allows for an open and transparent process, because without it, this package, unfortunately, has no chance of becoming law. We need a rule that allows for amendments that can add what this package is missing, a compromise that will fund border security, reopen the government, pay our faithful employees who are now struggling to make ends meet, and get back to the business of serving the American people. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the chance to testify here. I yield back.
Thank you, Acting Chairman Hastings, Ranking Member Coles, and other members of this distinguished committee. I'm honored to be speaking to you today as the newly appointed Ranking Member of the Interior and Environment's Appropriations Subcommittee, and my first time in front of the Rules Committee. I'm also honored to be paired with the newly appointed Chair of the subcommittee, my friend and fellow Great Lakes advocate, Congresswoman Betty McCollum of Minnesota. I'm thrilled to be working with her in this capacity, and I look forward to many years of bipartisanship and collaboration on behalf of our constituents, our states, and the entire nation. But I must admit, I wish I were here today under different circumstances. The Interior bill before us today was negotiated in good faith by House Republicans as part of a comprehensive package funding critical government functions, including securing our nation's southern border. House Republicans conditionally agreed to drop a number of our highest priority provisions in the Interior bill in exchange for other priorities in the comprehensive package, including strengthened border security. There is an old saying in negotiating that nothing is agreed to until everything is agreed to. And since a compromise has not been found on border security, the Interior bill and the other bills before us today are not a true conference agreement. To suggest otherwise would be to mislead the public in an attempt to gain high ground on an issue most of our constituents expect us to instead find compromise. So I'm here today to respectfully urge this committee to open up these bills to amendments on the House floor. Let the House work its will in the compromise proposals to enhance our border security to begin to fix our broken immigration system as a whole. Instead of fighting for the high ground, let's work together to find the common ground. Thank you for your time today and the opportunity to speak to all of you.
Friend, Mr. Diaz-Balart, my fellow Floridian and Everglades Caucus Chair. And Mr. Diaz-Balart, I would encourage you, you also have an amendment, and if you are prepared to go forward with that, we would appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Cole, I greatly appreciate the opportunity to be in front of all of you today. Before I begin, last time I was in front of this committee, I took the opportunity, really a point of personal privilege, to speak about Mr. Hastings. And little did I know then that a person who has been fighting all his life was in for another huge fight. And so Mr. Hastings, Chairman Hastings and I have become friends, close friends. He has helped me immensely to become a better legislator. And Mr. Chairman, you have not only been an effective fighter, but you've been fighting all your life. You've dealt with adversity. You've always done it with courage, with grace, and with dignity, as you are now in this fight. And I just want you to know that it is a privilege, sir, to be in front of you in this committee, but also to serve with you in this House.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mark.
Let me, if I may, Mr. Chairman, the Transportation, Housing, Urban Development portion of this bill reflects a negotiated agreement that I'm proud to have worked with Chairman Price. I think Chairman Price talked about the bill, and I think he did a good job describing some of the main elements, very positive elements of this bill. I think this is a really good bill. I'm very proud of this bill, and I'm very proud of the relationship that Chairman Price and I have, and allowed us to put this bill that we are now discussing here today. I fear, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, that unfortunately, as Mr. Rogers said, unfortunately, this will not reopen the government. Unfortunately, this will not reopen the government. We've had debates on the floor for a number of weeks, good, bad, or indifferent, but I've been saying, you know, look, unfortunately, while people were saying, yeah, if we voted for that one, if that passed the House, it was going to reopen the bill, well, the government, well, it did not reopen the government. And I fear that once again, and I'm not saying this, Mr. Chairman, to say to folks, oh, I told you so, but I fear that once again, this will not reopen the government. On Saturday, the President put forward what I believe was a good faith effort to address security and the humanitarian issues, crisis on the border, and provide relief to hundreds of thousands of DACA and those also individuals, and also those on temporary protected status. I believe it was a sincere effort by the President to also reach across the aisle and to move us closer to a deal that can, again, get us to reopen the government. Unfortunately, the Democratic leadership dismissed the President's offer before it had even been released, before they had an opportunity to look at that, which I thought was, again, unfortunate. So we are now where we are, which is why, Mr. Chairman, if I can, let me talk about, if I may talk about the amendment that I bring forward. And I do this, frankly, with the hope that this amendment could allow us, if it's allowed to, if it's made in order, and if we have an open rule, which is, I think, the key issue that you're hearing from us, is if you have an open rule on this bill, I think there's some great ideas out there from both Republicans and Democrats that would allow these great bills to move forward and reopen the government. But I'm, again, in front of you once again, bringing what I believe is an idea that has strong bipartisan support that could be added to this bill, and that, again, would allow us to reopen. And what is it? It is something that Republicans and Democrats have stated publicly, openly, for a long time that we all support, which is legalize the dreamers. This is beyond DACA. Legalize the dreamers. Legalize those who are here on TPS, who are now, again, in this limbo. And in exchange, or as part of it, also do real border security. When I was here last time, Mr. Chairman, and I didn't want to go back and forth, because I literally am trying to just see if there's ways that we can all figure out where we can agree. But then I heard some folks in the committee say, well, but wait a second, this is, you know, talking about putting the DACA folks there. That's using them as pawns. That's playing with those folks. You know, with all due respect, trying to legalize the dreamers, using the legislative process to try to legalize the dreamers, for someone who's been, like me, who's been trying to do this, and many of others that I've heard and want to do that,
Using the legislative process to try to legalize them is what we're supposed to be doing. And I will never apologize for fighting for those dreamers. And here's an opportunity, a great opportunity where we could get bipartisan support to do so. I also heard, and I want to thank Mrs. Torres, because she did mention how I had signed a discharge petition last Congress to try to deal with helping the dreamers. But I would remind everybody that let's about another discharge petition. That was, again, Mrs. Torres was not there, so she would have no way to necessarily know about this. There was another discharge petition in 2014 on a bipartisan immigration bill. And we don't have to get into the merits of it, good, bad, or indifferent. But let me tell you what that bill had for border security. $42 billion for border security. And all of a sudden, we can't even talk about $5 or $6 billion that somehow is wrong? We have an opportunity. And that's why I do this with great respect. We have an opportunity, if we have an open process, if we allow amendments to get put on these bills on the floor. I have this proposal, which I'm hoping will be made in order, but I guarantee you there are dozens of Democrats and Republicans who have other ideas that could add value to these very good bills and allow us not only to improve the bills, but to reopen the government. Mr. Chairman, that's what the amendment does. I thank you for the opportunity, and more importantly, as I said before, Mr. Chairman, I thank you for the way that you have always treated me, sir, with dignity, respect, love. You know that you have my admiration. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. I would remind you all that under Rule 21, an open rule would probably not be in order going forward. But at this time, I'm going to forego questions again and turn to Ms. Torres for any questions she may have.
I do not, and I yield back.
Mr. Cole, my good friend.
I'm going to follow the good example set by our chairman, but I do want to make one quick observation, if I may. These are all my fellow appropriators on both sides of the aisles. This was the last panel, as will be the next panel. I just want to state for the record, they are the most successful group of appropriators in 22 years in terms of the amount of spending they got done by September 30th. And they did that in a very bipartisan manner, working together. And I want to echo both the chairman and our chairman emeritus's call. If you left it to these people, this would get done.
Thank you. I'm going to go out of order this time so as how I don't forget Ms. Lesko. Ms. Lesko? Okay. Mr. Perlmutter? Ms. Matsui? Okay. Any questions on our side? All right, I thank the witnesses, and we're prepared to call up our second panel at this time.
Mr. Chairman,
yes,
may I just
by all means
be very brief, because for me it's always such an honor to serve on appropriation, whether in a position of chair, better to be chair, but, but ranking member. And as you can see from the comments from all of my colleagues, I'm really so proud of all of our members on both sides of the aisle. And if left to us, I am convinced we wouldn't be in this position, because there is no reason for us to shut down the government. We could sit with each other and work it all out. So thank you very much for giving us the honor of appearing before you. I hope this is all resolved sooner.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate you all. Are there any other members who wish to testify on this legislation? Seeing none, we are now going to move to our second bill, H.J. Res. 31, and my classmate and longtime friend, Ms. Roybal Allett, is a part of this panel, and Representative Fleischman. I've called on you, Lucille. Are you all ready? Okay. Sometimes when you have names, it's good to spell them out phonetically. Yeah. Classmate. Thank you. Ms. Robel, you are now recognized.
A continuing resolution to reopen the Department of Homeland Security after a funding lapse that is now over 31 days and counting. This is a simple extension of funding until February 28th with no new funding anomalies. The only new provisions are to provide the department with the authority to provide back pay to personnel and to reimburse state and other federal grantees consistent with prior precedent following a lapse in appropriations. Mr. Chairman, there are only two approaches to take. Either we reopen the department and the rest of the federal government without conditions, or we continue to use federal workers and everyone who depends on them as bargaining chips in funding negotiations. It seems to me that the choice is straightforward. I know my friends on the other side of the aisle have criticized the consideration of clean CRs on the basis that the Senate will not pass them and the President will not sign them. To my friends on the other side of the aisle, I would say that all it would take to change that is to reopen the Department of Homeland Security by having every member of the minority party support the CR. That would help change the thinking of the Senate Majority Leader and perhaps even change the thinking of the President. That way, those who protect our homeland can be paid as they continue their critical work of protecting our country. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fleischman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Cole, Chairman Hastings, this too is my very first appearance before this distinguished Rules Committee.
Welcome, welcome.
So thank you so much. And before I begin my remarks, I do want to thank the members of this committee. This is a hard-working committee. This is a committee that
we're going to learn to like this guy.
Yeah, and really, you really facilitate our time, what we do on the floor. Another committee I have a tremendous amount of affinity for is the Appropriations Committee. And I'm sure you all were paying attention to the very laudatory rhetoric, the bipartisan rhetoric that we had, the affinity that we have for one another on this committee. And it's been a great privilege to serve on that committee. I am here testifying today in my new role on this committee as the Homeland Security Subcommittee ranking member. I guess Ms. Robel-Allard and I got the hot potato. And I do look forward to working very closely with Ms. Robel-Allard in her role as the chairman. We are friends, we work well together, and we've actually sat down and we talked. We know, let's face it, there are definite differences in the ways that our members view where we are. I think it's very important to focus on a couple of things. First of all, people are hurting. A lot of federal workers are not getting their paychecks, and that's bothersome to me. It's bothersome to me as a legislator. It's bothersome to me as an American. And I do think as we continue to go through this, the rhetoric is very important. I spoke last week on the floor, and I said, let us avoid terms like good faith and bad faith. I believe we are all acting in good faith. We're passionate about the way that we feel. And our constituents, I come from a very Republican district in East Tennessee, but not every person in that district views the world the way I do, just as in some of the more liberal districts in this country. Not everyone looks at the world the way that their member views it. But we are elected to govern, and right now we are at an impasse. And I think the best way when we're at an impasse, I practiced law for 24 years in Chattanooga, and when we had an impasse, many times we sat down and we worked out a compromise. We came to the table. We didn't get everything we got. Sometimes we didn't get 50% of what we needed. But it is my fervent hope, knowing that the President will not sign a bill that does not have sufficient border security, and I respectfully agree with the President on that point. I know not everybody does. We understand that the Senate will not take this up. If there was a mechanism in place that we could get together and come up with something that everyone could live with, I think would be very beneficial, not only to the American people, but really to our reputation as legislators. Because the American people, whether Republican, Democrat, independent, political or apolitical, are looking for leadership right now. And I would like to see that leadership come from the great people's house. Mr. Chairman, with that, I yield back.
Thank you very much. Ms. Torres? Mr. Cole?
Again, I have no question on follow a good example, but I must say I know how good these two members are, Mr. Chairman, because when I had the good fortune of being chairman of Labor, Health, and Human Services and Education, they were two of my very best members on that committee. So it's great to see both my friends here. My friend now is a chairman in her own right in an important committee. My good friend now is a ranking member as well. And as he knows, having worked with her on the Labor and Age Committee, you're very fortunate to be paired with such a skilled legislator and such a wonderful member of this body. Yield back.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lesko. Any member on our side have any questions? Oh, I'd like to thank our witnesses for being here today, particularly my classmate and longtime friend, Ms. Roa Valala, and pleased to see you all with the hot potato. I'm sure you can handle it. With that in mind, we'd like to, if you have anything you'd like to insert into the record for the stenographer, we'd appreciate it. Are there any other members who wish to testify on this legislation? Seeing none, this closes the hearing portion of our meeting. At this time, the chair will entertain a motion from the distinguished gentlewoman, my good friend from California, Ms. Torres.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Motion for H.R. 648 and H.J. Res. 31. Mr. Chairman, I move the committee grant H.R.
Alex, close the door. Thanks. Gotcha.
I move the committee grant H.R. 648, the Consolidated Appropriations Act 2019, a closed rule. The rule provides 1 hour of debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Appropriations or their designees. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. The rule provides that the bill shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against provisions in the bill. The rule provides that Clause 2E of Rule 21 shall not apply during consideration of the bill. The rule provides one motion to recommit. Section 2 of the rule provides for consideration of H.J. Res. 31, making further continuing appropriations for the Department of Homeland Security for fiscal year 2019, and for other purposes under a closed rule. The rule provides 1 hour of debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Appropriations or their designees. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the joint resolution. The rule provides that the joint resolution shall be considered as read, and the rule waives all points of order against provisions in the joint resolution. The rule provides one motion to recommit. Section 3 of the rule provides that it shall be in order at any time through the legislative day of February 1, 2019, for the Speaker to entertain motions that the House suspend the rules as though under Clause 1 of Rule 15, and that the Speaker or her designee shall consult with the minority leader or his designee on the designation of any matter for consideration pursuant to this section. Finally, Section 4 of the rule waives the requirement of Clause 6A of Rule 13 for 2/3 vote to consider a report from the Committee on Rules on the same day it is presented to the House with respect to any resolution reported through the legislative day of January 30th, 2019, relating to a measure making or continuing appropriations for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2019.
Thank you very much. As we've just heard from the gentlewoman from California, the rule provides for consideration of H.R. 648, the Consolidated Appropriations Act, under a closed rule. This package will fund 6 of the 7 remaining appropriations bills through the end of the fiscal year. The rule also provides for consideration for H.J. Res. 31, a continuing resolution for the Department of Homeland Security until February 28th. It also provides suspension authority through February 1st and same-day authority for appropriations measures through January 30th. With that in mind, you've heard the motion from the gentlewoman from California. Is there any amendment or discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment.
Mr. Cole?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment to the rule to report a modified open rule for H.R. 648, the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2019. The rule would require that all amendments be received for printing in the portion of the congressional record dated at least 1 day before the day of consideration of the amendment. In 2011, Mr. Chairman, right after the Republicans took the majority control in the House, the government was operating under a continuing resolution, and we considered a bill on the floor to fund the entire federal government. This amendment would provide for a similar process. The Senate will not pass anything that the President cannot sign, and the President has said that he will not sign anything that does not fund border security. Consequently, this bill will not pass the Senate and not be signed into law. And a modified open rule would give us an opportunity, Mr. Chairman, to actually change the bill in ways that would allow it to be signed into law. So rather than continuing this process of passing similar bills over and over, I think we would be better negotiating with the Senate and the President over funding border security. I think these other matters would be very quickly resolved if we could simply do that. So, Mr. Chairman, with that, I urge support of the amendment.
Thank my friend. We've heard the amendment from Mr. Cole. Is there any other discussion? Yes, Ms. Lesko.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do support Representative Cole's amendment, but to the bill itself, I guess I'll say the same thing I've said at every other bill, and that I feel like we're in Groundhog Day, and that I think this is a motion in futility because we're not, you know, the Senate is going to be working on a bill that hopefully will be a compromise over there. We know that this one, because it doesn't have any funding for border security, and I can tell you that my district really supports having a border fence. I just was on a telephone town hall today, and 90% of the people that were on the survey supported a border fence. And so until we really get down to serious discussion about adding border security or coming back with a counterproposal, I see this as going nowhere, and it's just, as I said, Groundhog Day. I think we really need to come up with some serious compromise, and that's all I have to say, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion at this time? Hearing none, the vote is on the gentleman's amendment. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All those opposed, no? No. Okay. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. Ask for a roll call, if the clerk would call the roll.
Mr. Hastings?
No.
Mr. Hastings votes no. Mrs. Torres? No. Mrs. Torres votes no. Ms. Matsui? Mr. Perlmutter? Mr. Perlmutter votes no. Mr. Raskin? Ms. Scanlon? Ms. Scanlon votes no. Mr. Morelli? No. Mr. Morelli votes no. Ms. Shalala? No. Ms. Shalala votes no. Mr. Cole?
Aye.
Mr. Cole votes aye. Mr. Woodall? Mr. Burgess? Mrs. Lesko? Aye. Mrs. Lesko votes aye. Mr. Chairman?
No. Wait a minute now.
I didn't know he was calling
Wait a
a
minute.
second.
You get 2 votes?
Yeah, I was just...
Yeah, it's already pretty stacked here as it is.
He wasn't telling me what to... Ready to vote no all the time. Go ahead.
2 yeas, 6 nays.
Thank you very much. In the opinion of the chair, all the noes have it, and the amendment is not agreed to. Is there any other amendment or discussion at this time? No further amendments? Then the chair Is there any other amendment or discussion? None. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes are well, no. The question is now on the motion offered by the gentleman from California, young lady from California. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no.
No.
Okay. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes?
May we have a roll call, please?
Please call the roll, Mr.
Thank you,
Clerk.
Mr. Chairman.
Mrs. Torres. Aye. Mrs. Torres votes aye. Ms. Matsui. Mr. Perlmutter. Mr. Perlmutter votes aye. Mr. Raskin. Ms. Scanlon. Ms. Scanlon votes aye. Mr. Morelli. Aye. Mr. Morelli votes aye. Ms. Shalala. Aye. Ms. Shalala votes aye. Mr. Cole.
No.
Mr. Cole votes no. Mr. Woodall. Mr. Burgess. Mrs. Lesko. No. Mrs. Lesko votes no. Mr. Chairman?
I vote aye.
Mr. Chairman votes aye.
The clerk will report the total.
6 yeas, 2 nays.
The ayes have it, and the motion is agreed to. Accordingly, the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. McGovern, will manage for the majority.
And Mr. Woodall will manage for the minority.
Before we conclude, I'd like to take a moment of personal privilege and thank all of you that have offered thoughts and prayers regarding my personal fight with cancer. This is probably as rough an ordeal as an individual can be confronted with, but to be surrounded by so many people, not just on this particular committee, but throughout the Congress and around the nation, it's heartwarming and gives me added strength going forward. I do want to also take a moment of personal privilege away from my personal concerns and thank the 800,000 employees, and I'm sure I speak for everybody in this room and for this entire Congress. Thank them, particularly those who have been furloughed, particularly those who have come back to work. Like you all, I've been on airplanes recently, and like most of us, I know TSA personnel personally from having gone through working with them. But if I start with this, it will make a mistake, and it's a mistake I intend to make. The air traffic controllers who are working without pay are doing this nation a tremendous service. The same for the Coast Guard, and those of us that live in coastal regions recognize that, as well as those along the border, how important their work is. Not to mention TSA. Came through a checkpoint, like I'm sure most of you, where they had reduced staff, and without pronouncing it, it shows the potential for vulnerabilities. Our food safety is something all of us ought likely be concerned about, and I'm sure that the FDA, the EPA, and not to mention the FBI, and the number of cases that they're having to either hold in abeyance or try and work at the very same time that this shutdown is ongoing. And indeed, those who work at Border and Customs Control, they have their concerns. Cabinet agencies where there are unfilled positions, not enough immigration judges to handle the folk that are there. I'm going to tell y'all something. This is 82 years of wisdom at this particular point in time. If we don't, I'm talking now Republicans and Democrats, liberals and conservatives, if we don't, within a reasonable period of time going forward, cut this shutdown down, then we're going to witness a pox on all our houses.